Look how cute she is, all smushed up. Little smushy. Welcome back to my channel. It's been so long since I have sat down and filmed a vlog, and I'm officially a mum now to a little Eloin. We are currently 4 weeks postpartum. I managed to pre-film some things and give ourselves time off, and today I really wanted to go through my birth story. So if you haven't seen the birth vlog, you can watch that first. I'll link it here above me. But I did vlog our birth, and I really wanted to do that because birth vlogs for me when I was pregnant were just so inspirational and made me feel so positive about birth. So I knew that if I had a positive birth experience, I wanted to share it, you know, real and raw, and have that be there for people who are pregnant or people who are anticipating birth. And it was a really lovely experience to film it and have that memory. And the response has been incredible. The amount of you who've sent me kind, supportive messages, or just said that this brought back memories for you because you're a mum, or you're pregnant and it's made you excited to give birth, or that you are not a mum and you never intend on having children, but you really felt emotional watching it because it was an intense and emotional video and you have watched my channel for a long time. And just, I could not have expected such a lovely response, and I was a little nervous posting it, but I'm so glad I did. And I'm so passionate now about pregnancy and childbirth and being a new mum that this is kind of a whole new thing for me that, yeah, I'm just very passionate about. So I wanted to do a birth story where I kind of sit down and go through my experience with birth and going overdue specifically, because I gave birth at 42 plus 3, which was 17 days overdue. And I also had a natural birth, or I hesitate to use the word natural because it's not unmedicated. I had gas and air, but I didn't have an induction or use any sort of pain medication like an epidural. I know some people debate whether gas and air is medicated, but I don't think it had that much of an effect. It was almost a bit of a placebo for me. But I didn't have any like, you know, official pain medication. Eloin is currently asleep on Alex in a carrier, so we will see how much time I get to film this video until she might need a breastfeed. And I might have to come back to it later, but let's get into it. Okay, so in the lead up to birth, I want to talk about that a little bit because it was a slightly different experience than most. Obviously, most people give birth between 37 and 42 weeks. Once you go over 40 weeks, you are officially overdue, and doctors and midwives often encourage induction because they are worried about the risks that can happen post dates. I had originally planned for a home birth, and my plan kind of had to change as time went on. I never expected that I would get to 42 plus 3 weeks. It was a very difficult experience for me. I think it was more difficult than labour and the birth, because that's kind of a momentary thing and you deal with it and you know your baby's going to be there at the end. But the mental struggle of going overdue was something that I will never forget. Those weeks post my due date were very challenging. Even the lead up to my due date, I was a bit like, ooh, am I going to give birth before my due date? I think in my last vlog I had some sort of period-like pains, maybe around 38 weeks, and I started to think, oh gosh, am I going to go into labour early? Obviously that didn't happen. So I switched off from work around my due date, and I expected to go into labour probably that week. Every day I was anticipating it and feeling more nervous as the days went on. Because, like I said, once you go overdue, doctors and midwives often talk to you about induction, which I really didn't want. So my original birth plan was a home birth without any pain medication, just gas and air and maybe painkillers like paracetamol in a birth pool. We bought a birth pool to use at home. We also hired a doula, Alana, who is incredible. And if you are based in Cornwall, West Cornwall, then definitely reach out to her because she was so helpful during pregnancy and also the birth and postpartum. She's offered breastfeeding support. She also does pregnancy massage and postpartum massage, which I need to book in. So we plan to have a doula with us and yeah, just go about it in the most calm, at home, cozy, comforting way where I'd feel secure. Because for me personally, Hospitals scare me a little bit, and so does medical intervention. Alex is similar. He has fainted in hospitals. He's got a bit of white coat syndrome. So we both felt much more comfortable being at home if I have a low risk pregnancy and baby is all healthy and good. I was hoping for that still, and there was kind of talks when I was going into my midwife appointments that if I do go post dates, they wouldn't recommend a home birth anymore, which did worry me a little bit. So we spent those 2 to 3 weeks at home just trying to soak up that lovely period where it's just the two of us. And at first it was really lovely. We were kind of going out on walks and going to the beach and watching lots of cozy TV and spending time together. And I do look back and think if it wasn't for the fact that I was overdue, we would never have had that time together, because I would have just finished work and had the baby straight away. So in a lot of ways, I try and frame it now as it was meant to be, and that was a lovely time that we got to have between the two of us. On the other side of it though, once I reached 41 weeks and I was approaching the 42-week side, I really did fall down a hole of being very, very stressed, going online, reading up about the risks, reading up about other women who've been overdue, inductions, and really just fell down this hole of being very, very scared, and also trying to naturally induce labour. So really obsessing over stretches, the miles circuit, you know, lots of oxytocin, so comedy films, and spending time with Alex. And yeah, I was obsessing over it to a point that it was becoming quite stressful. I do have a history with health anxiety, and I really think it triggered that because I was over obsessing about what I could do and what could go wrong, when deep down I know the facts, I know the statistics around when you go overdue. While there is a risk, the risk is still extremely small, and I was a low risk pregnancy and perfectly healthy, and I was going in for regular monitoring. So I personally felt like I didn't want to have an induction because the risks for that were also present and made me very worried. And everyone's different, by the way. When I'm sharing this is my personal feelings, and I think every woman is extremely, it's so extremely important that every woman is entitled to her own bodily autonomy when it comes to pregnancy and birth. I think it's incredible if another woman chooses hospital, induction, elective C-sections, epidurals, because that's what they want to do. That is their birth plan, and I support it because that will make them feel happy and comfortable. I think the issue is when women feel pressured and stressed to make choices that they wouldn't otherwise have made, because of the pressure of the sort of medical system. And again, I'm not against the medical system at all. I think it's there for a reason, and it's incredible because it helps bring babies into the world safely when those situations arise that's needed. But when someone like me who's got a healthy baby, and I was healthy because, like I said, I was having checks and scans, I think there is an element of pressure that I did find extremely stressful and difficult. And the way things are now, I do disagree with. I think that the pressure to induce women so soon after they go overdue is problematic, because it can lead to interventions that otherwise the woman wouldn't have wanted or chosen, and can cause trauma for women. I've had lots of messages since sharing my story that women have had that experience. Lots of messages where people have had extremely positive experiences of induction, and that's amazing. But there are a lot of women who go through the pressure to be induced, end up being induced, and then the cascade of intervention happens where lots of things happen in birth which they wouldn't have otherwise planned for, and which can cause issues for them. I wonder in hindsight if that's what actually delayed my labour a little bit, because I was so stressed and so worried. And I didn't really show it in the vlog as much because I didn't show me on camera crying my eyes out and having kind of those mental breakdowns about it, but it really did make me extremely stressed and worried on a daily basis. I was going back and forth with my family, like crying my eyes out, like what am I going to do? Should I just go into the hospital? But then being so afraid of induction because it's not what I wanted, and the things that can happen from induction, kind of going a bit mad over it. And I'm sure if you've gone overdue by maybe a longer time, you can understand this. It does make you feel very, very worried. We opted for continual monitoring instead of an induction. We went into the hospital a few times for scans, CTGs, everything was always perfectly healthy, like it has been throughout my pregnancy. I've had no issues at any point. That was the case every time I went in, which was really good and made me feel very reassured. And then when I was 42 weeks, we had the conversation again with the doctor about induction, and I said to them I would book in for an induction at the end of the week, because I think I was going so mad that I was like, I can't wait any longer. I'm just going to book it in for Friday, because I think if I go past 42 plus, that would be 42 plus 5, I probably will just go a bit mad and I just need to meet my baby. We tried for a sweep on the Sunday, on the Monday, and then on the Wednesday we tried for a sweep, a membrane sweep this is, and it worked. And I can hear Eloin. Do you want to bring her in?
Oh, nappy time first.
Oh, nappy time first. Yeah, and on the Wednesday we went in for membrane sweep and it worked because I was 1 centimetre. Previous ones didn't work because I wasn't dilated. And I was so relieved because we had the CTG, it was all good, and then I could have a membrane sweep. And for the midwife to say to me I was 1 centimetre, I was like, finally, because I had been, oh yeah, this is a part I forgot to mention. I was having prodromal labour, which is false labour, for 1 or 2 weeks before I gave birth, which was partly what made me actually go so mad, which I forgot to mention, is that every evening or every other evening, I was having early labour signs, so contractions, surges, period-like pains, that would never escalate. So I would have them, which probably most women have experienced in their early labour before they actually are dilated, and then they would just disappear. So I would be constantly made to feel like I was going into labour, and then nothing would happen. And that was probably what really made me feel very worried, because every day I'd be like, oh, is it happening? Is it happening? And it wouldn't happen. And they would be quite painful sometimes. Not painful like actual labour, like established labour, but like I'd wake up and be like, oh, what's that pain? And I start tracking them. And one time I rang the midwife in the night because I was like, they're like 5 minutes apart, but they weren't ever developing to anything more. And often that they would die out. But the day that I had the membrane sweep, when it worked and she was able to do it, that's the day I actually went into labour. So who knows whether it was the sweep or whether I was going to go into labour anyway, I don't know. But on the way home from the hospital, I had my first like contraction surge that felt like the other surges I've been having, except it came around to the front, which I had known from looking it up that is a sign of real labour, because it had all been in my back before. It started to come around to the front and it started to feel a bit more painful. The false labour I was having was painful, but more like uncomfortable painful. This felt more like when I used to have period pains that were bad, that it would be like, oh, okay, you kind of have to stop for a second and take a breath. So I had that around 2 p.m. in the afternoon, 3 p.m, came home, and I was tracking them with the Freya app, which I really recommend. That was very helpful to track the surges and see if they were escalating or not. And they were getting longer and closer together. So the afternoon we just spent at home. I made food, I watched TV, I had a bath, and another indicator that it was actually happening was that when I had the bath, the contractions didn't go away, which I now know, yeah, if you often have a bath, if you're having false labour, that can make it go away. I'm so glad I had a bath because I washed my hair, I felt all clean, we had a really wholesome, delicious dinner, and then just chilled out for the whole evening, watched Yes Man, and then I think around 11 p.m. midnight, I started to think this is actually painful now, we need to pack our bags, because we had made the decision that post 42 weeks, we wanted to have our birth in the hospital. Mainly for me because of the risk of meconium. So when you go past 42 weeks, there is a risk that the baby will have meconium, which is poo, baby poo, basically newborn baby poo, and that they might inhale that when you give birth. The risk is still very small, but it is still there. And I thought if I'm at home and that happens, that there is an increased risk of getting to the hospital and keeping the baby safe. So I just personally felt more safe in the hospital. Basically, the baby's digestive system is more developed, so they're more likely to poo, which she did, and it was a lot of poo. Luckily, she didn't inhale it. And I put the TENS machine on my back, which helped so much. I really recommend a TENS machine. I literally used that throughout my entire labour, the whole dilation. It just distracts you from the pain so well. So I had that on and I was just kind of going through the motions, and then we got in the car and drove to the hospital, and that was very difficult. I definitely felt that the contractions were getting very painful at that point. It was taking my breath away. I was really having to do the kind of hypnobirthing, deep breaths. When we got to the hospital, we went up to the birth suite because it was outside of guidelines to use the birthing centre. So there's a difference between the two. One is in an area where there are doctors, and one is led by the midwives. So one area is a bit nicer, the birthing centre. You've got your pool, you've got cosy bed and low lighting. The birthing suite is more like a hospital setting, and there are doctors around, and it's there for like things like continual monitoring if you're post dates. So we went up in there and got set up, had a CTG to check how baby was doing, And then I think the midwife checked me to see how dilated I was. I think the baby is... Do you want to... Is she done?
Yeah.
So you can meet the baby. Do you want to meet the baby? And I'll have to continue this once I've finished breastfeeding. Hello. Oh, this is a really good time to meet her. She's crying. Maybe I'll meet her when I finish breastfeeding. Hello, Bobby.
No.
Are you a bit unhappy? Yeah, let's meet when we finish breastfeeding because she wants some food. Mwah. Okay, baby is fed. Let's see if I can sit here with her whilst I finish my little story. Are you going to stay settled, little one? Right, so I think I was at the point where I was in the hospital, had the C2G, everything was good, and then they did a vaginal examination and I was only 1 centimetre still, which I could not believe because the contractions were feeling quite intense at that point. I know when I arrived at the hospital, I was able to have a chat in between them, and that was the point where I was kind of like bracing myself a bit. Then they said to me, okay, we need to go kind of assess the situation. And they basically said, you can't stay in the birthing suite because you're only 1 centimetre, because established labour is when you're more like 4 centimetres. And again, this is kind of a crude measure in my opinion, because women dilate very differently and there's only so much you can gather from how dilated your cervix is. Because for me personally, I dilated pretty fast. I was 1 centimetre. They said you can't really stay in the birthing suite because obviously they have to save those spaces for women who are 4 centimetres dilated. Completely understandable. So they said you either go home or you can go downstairs to the ward, and I absolutely no way in hell could go home because the drive in was already quite challenging, quite painful. I thought we went downstairs straight away after that, and I forgot after looking at the footage that actually we stayed upstairs for quite a while. I'm pretty sure the midwife kind of went away and I had a sleep and sort of slept between my contractions because I don't remember that very well. I guess they sort of left us there for a while. I think I was exhausted because it was the middle of the night. And then I think we went downstairs at maybe like 4 AM, but they didn't check my dilation again. I guess, yeah, I think it was around between 4 and 5:30ish. That's when we were down in the ward, and I thought we were down there for ages because that was the stage where my contractions were really intense and potentially the point of labour that was the most painful, because I remember it so vividly. It wasn't the most tiring, but it was the most painful. So we went down to the wards. I think Alana made the lighting nice in there. She put some classical music on. They got me water, and I remember lying in the bed and just being like, I cannot move in any other position. So I lay down on my side. I couldn't imagine being on a birthing ball or being stood up or moving. I had all these plans for like, you know, leaning on Alex or kind of using the birthing ball and moving around to get things sort of feeling better, but I could not face anything but being on my side and just bracing myself for each contraction because they were so intense. Shortly after, I think, being downstairs, my mucus plug came out, which is your bloody show, which is another sign of established labour. And then I think my waters broke shortly after that. I think the midwife maybe popped them. I don't know, I'm not entirely sure, but there was a funny moment where I think that maybe my waters broke a bit, and then she sort of helped the last bit along, and I think it sprayed in her face because I remember hearing her say that but being a bit like, what's going on, because I was so deliriously out of it. And you can see in the video clips that I was making those kind of low mooing sounds. I was thinking about my breathing, so I definitely used hypnobirthing at that point. I was imagining a hot air balloon, so counting in for like 4, holding for about 4, and then releasing, is it like 4, 4, 6? I don't really remember, but I did the hypnobirthing and then imagine the hot air balloon kind of going into the sky, and that enabled me to focus on something. I'd really recommend learning those breathing techniques so you have something to focus on. And the thing that I kept on thinking of was, this is only going to last a minute. I can do anything for a minute. That really got me through those pains because they were very intense, and I had to grab onto Alex's hand and arm and just dig in almost and just feel through it, and it definitely peaks and then goes away. And I think that is honestly what got me through it, is the idea that there's going to be a peak and then it's going to die off and then I'm going to have a break. The worst was when you had a contraction back to back. I had quite a few of those where you'd have a contraction and immediately you'd have another, so you wouldn't get a break, and that was hell. The contractions started to get very long. I mean, they had been quite long for quite a while, but to be honest, I do feel like we were left a little bit because I was 1 centimetre. The midwives were kind of like, well, you're not close and you're not going to be close for ages because typically it takes a while. You know, go downstairs and we'll see. But I knew because of how intense they were, and I think that Alana and Alex knew that things were escalating. And I remember them being like, they're definitely way longer than a minute and she's definitely in quite a lot of intense pain right now. And so I started to feel the urge to push. It was just an involuntary feeling. It was very different from the contractions. It was a sudden kind of, my breathing and my sounds went from kind of that low, deep mooing sound to kind of like a feeling of there is that urge to push. And the first time I had it, I was like, oh no, I'm not ready. I'm down here. I can't do that yet. And then I almost felt like, it was weird. I almost felt embarrassed, or like I shouldn't say that because I can't be ready to push yet. This can't be happening already. I don't know why that thought came into my mind, but I vividly remember thinking, oh no, don't say anything. That's a bit embarrassing. You're not ready to push yet. You're down here. You can't be ready to push yet. Don't, that, you know, resist that feeling, which I definitely should not be thinking that when I'm in labour. That should be very natural. I should be in, I don't know, I think it's because of where I was, because I wasn't in the birthing suite. So as soon as that happened, Alana went and got a midwife because we were just there on our own. And she came in and she was like, okay, and she checked me. And I remember she checked, she's like, oh yeah, okay, we'll see how you are. And it was very like, she's very relaxed and slow and just like, yeah, you know, let's have a little look. And then she barely even opened my legs, or like, she's like, right, yep, you're 10 centimetres. And it was suddenly like, all things go. I remember the mood just being a bit like different. Yep, you're 10 centimetres. And then I think another midwife came in, they set up the bed to move it, or did I have to get on another bed? I don't really remember. And I was put on the bed and had to go upstairs to the birthing suite, and that was horrible because I was so dilated and having really intense contractions, and I had to obviously leave Alex and Alana, so I had to go in the lift because I think there's only a certain amount of people allowed in the lift. So I had to go in the lift with the midwife and have a contraction alone on that sort of stretcher, not stretcher, on the bed. And I remember just thinking, oh my God, this is just so dramatic. I did not want this to be happening. And just going up the stairs and be like, oh my gosh, this contraction, how am I going to get through this? Is there going to be another one before I get to the room? And then obviously the bed didn't fit through the door. So we were at the door and they're like, you're going to have to stand up and walk into the room. And I remember thinking, I don't know if I can stand up. And they helped me to stand up, and I remember walking into the room and it just being very painful and very much like, I don't really want to be moving right now. And I really didn't, I kind of, in that moment was kind of resenting that I was in that situation, because that was the moment where I felt like my intuition and my knowledge of my body wasn't really listened to. When we went upstairs though, obviously we were then taken care of by a midwife who was amazing. She was such a support throughout, and I think they initially put me on like monitoring, so every like 15 minutes they would check the baby's heartbeat because I'm overdue. So I think I got on all fours. I started to use that J breath, that hypnobirthing, breathing down into your bottom on my all fours every contraction, because I was having that urge to push, which was very different from the contractions I was having before, which I could describe as like more like intense, very, very intense period pain. But yeah, the pushing was slightly different. It was painful, but it was more like it was an urge feeling. I don't know how to describe it. So it's like, it was painful contraction, but the urge to push was there. So it was more tiring. It was like, this is exhausting because your body is really using its muscles. And I ended up pushing for a very long time, nearly 3 hours. And I was on all fours for a long time. My arms were aching, my knees were aching. I was trying to breathe through the pain, breathe through each contraction. And honestly, I think in hindsight, I wish I'd maybe looked at different perspectives around labour and different experiences in terms of breathing versus pushing, because within the sort of hypnobirthing community, it's very much like, you don't have to push, you can breathe your baby out, and that is the kind of ideal. The reality is that for some women that's not a possibility, and for me that was not a possibility, because if I'd carried on doing that, I probably would have had forceps, because baby was not coming out through me just breathing. And yeah, some women have the amazing experience of having that the infant eject reflex or something, where you just have a few urges to push and your body kind of does it for you, and you breathe the baby out. It's painful, but it's like that urge and the baby just comes down. What was happening with me was every time I was having a contraction and pushing, baby was coming down but kind of going back up again. I was doing that for a really long time until the midwife noted that when she was checking my heart rate, not my heart rate, sorry, the baby's heart rate, it was dipping a little bit. Maybe this was after 2 hours or so, or 1.5 hours. And she said, this can be totally normal. Babies in labour, like, they're just getting tired, but it could also be a sign that they're getting tired and they could get more tired, and you don't want to end up with the doctor coming in and having to do things like forceps. So she was just making me aware of that. And she's like, I would suggest continual monitoring or the electrode to the head. And as soon as she said that, I think I got the clip of it in the vlog, that as soon as she said that, I was so motivated, because before that, it was very much just like being coached through pushing and just everyone being like, you can do this, you can do this. That was the first kind of talk of maybe we need some kind of intervention here. And I was like, absolutely not, I'm getting this baby out. So I immediately felt very motivated, and I really bared down, and she's like, bear down to your bottom. And from this point, I think the midwife and Alana started to kind of coach me a bit more. Before, they'd obviously taken a bit of a step back because I'd had in my birth plan that I wanted it to be calm and quiet, and kind of they were letting me use, I guess, the urges, natural urges of my body, and going through those contractions and helping me. But at that point, I think I was like, I'm so tired, I can't do this anymore. So they definitely started to be a bit more involved in how they were sort of describing how to do it. And the midwife was kind of essentially saying, don't make so much noise when you're pushing, just push, 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 and take very small breaths in between. Before, I was breathing through the whole thing, kind of breathing down and using that whole deep breath to try and push the baby out through breath. Whereas the way that she sort of explained to me was completely different, and it actually did help to get the baby to go down a bit. So it was very much more like push with all your might, and then take a very short breath, and then push even more with all might, and until you feel like your head's gonna basically explode, keep pushing, and then you can take a break when you need to take a break. And I carried on doing that for a while, and it definitely helped. And the midwife said to me, yes, she's definitely moving now. However, that did also halt. So there was another point where she was like, okay, so what I would suggest is potentially changing positions. Again, otherwise we may have to, I think at that point also she'd done the continual monitoring. I had the straps around my body where they could monitor the heart rate continuously, which I think was useful for her, so that she could know that they didn't need to get a doctor in because baby's heart rate was fine. Because when you do on and off monitoring, they only get a tiny snapshot. So she's like, you know, baby could literally be fine. That could be just a normal dip, or they could be getting tired. I will say I didn't love the monitoring. I do again think that that potentially might have made me feel a bit distracted, because having someone like basically reach their hand around and put cold gel on your stomach and be kind of touching you whilst you're having a contraction is distracting. And it took me out of that zone and that place of being very much deep in labour, deep in how my body feels. It makes you aware, and kind of then I'd be listening to the heartbeat thinking, is there something wrong? And waiting for her to tell me if there's something wrong. The continual monitoring, at first I could hear the heartbeat, and I was like, I don't want to hear that, so I asked her to turn it down. And I didn't love it being on my stomach. I think it was a bit of a distraction. But we went on my side, and that's when things actually started to move and work, and I think it really helped, because I think I'd just become exhausted on all fours, and maybe there wasn't enough space for baby to come out with the shape of my hips or my pelvis or whatever. So I went on my side. Hello, Roxy. I can't move, unfortunately, to put you in the bed. I went on my side, and that wasn't working for a little bit until Alana helped hold my leg up. So I had my leg right up, and she was holding it, so that I was basically like legs akimbo, enabling baby to like descend. And that's when I was really bearing down, really pushing, and baby's head started to make its way out. And the midwife was telling me this, which was really helpful, because she's like, you know, we can see the baby's hair. I think there's a clip of her saying we can practically see her eyebrows. Yeah, at that point it definitely got more painful because I was approaching the ring of fire. Now, I had the ring of fire, and I had a massive gap between a contraction and then another contraction. I think most people's ring of fire doesn't last for very long. I was very unlucky in that sense. I remember feeling it, and she was like, yes, this is that ring of fire moment. I think I cut it out of the video, but I remember saying to her, where's the contraction? Why is there not a contraction? Because there was such a long gap. She had been putting her finger up for me to bear down on, which was a bit painful, but I do think it kind of helped, because it was hard for me to understand where the baby was and how to push down. So she put her sort of finger up, and she'd say, push down onto my finger. Not long after, I gave birth to baby's head, and then she came out straight away afterwards. I think most of the time the baby's head comes out, then you have another contraction and you push the baby out, or maybe another few contractions, another few pushes. But as you can see in the video, she slipped right out at that point. I think probably she was ready to come out, and little Elowen was born. And it was the most euphoric experience of my life. I remember when she said baby's head was born, and when I reached the ring of fire moment, just being like, oh my gosh, finally it's over, because it'd been so long of pushing and so much effort, and I was so tired because it was through the night. And I was just like, oh, I'm finally going to meet her. And it's finally that moment I've dreamt of and imagined for so long, because you see so many videos of the baby coming out and being like, you've got to wait for that cry, you've got to see if they're all healthy and fine. And when she came out, she cried straight away, which was such a relief, because I know that it can take a minute for some people, and I was worried that that would be the case. They put her up on my stomach. I think her umbilical cord was kind of short, so they couldn't put her all the way up to my chest. Or maybe I'm just long. They put her on my stomach, and I remember just being like, I can't believe she's here, and just absolutely bawling my eyes out, and all the adrenaline, and just that feeling of just, it's over. I don't have to wait any longer to meet her. I don't have to be wondering if I'm going to have an induction or a C-section, or whether the labour is going to be, you know, dangerous or anything bad's going to happen, because that can happen in childbirth. Childbirth is risky, and lots of the time babies need help. You know, you need C-sections or forceps, or baby's breathing is not so good, or the heartbeat drops, and that happens to lots of women. It's happened to friends of mine, and that can be really scary. And I was so worried about something like that happening, and I was so grateful that I had a smooth sailing labour. Obviously it was painful, labour is painful, but nothing happened that needed any, there's no worries basically. Nothing bad happened, nothing worrying happened, and I'm so lucky that the whole experience was smooth in that sense, very intense but smooth. And she was there with me in my arms, and I remember looking at Alex and just being like, Alex, she's here, and him just kissing me. And I will also always remember Alex's support of me throughout labour, because he was so quiet and calm, because he's like that anyway. And I was obviously so worried about changing our plan from a home birth to a hospital birth, because partly because I'm afraid of hospitals kind of, and so is he. And I was so worried he wouldn't be able to be present because he was feeling faint or feeling sick. But he was there throughout the whole thing. Just he always was stroking me, because I'd said to him, I really love that feeling of someone stroking me. And that gentle sort of whisper in my ear of him sort of saying, you've got this, come on Maddie, you can do this. And just, he was just always there. I think he definitely took a few breaks, but I didn't notice because Alana was there for me too. But yeah, he was always there, just stroking my arm and giving me those words of confidence, and just kissing me, my arm, or kissing me. And in between every contraction, I was so thirsty, it was ridiculous. He would give me water, or I had like the electrolyte Lucozade drink. And I just remember looking at him at the end and just being like, Alex, like, we did it, look, she's here. And just being, and I remember him kind of, he was almost looking at me and looking after me before he was looking at Elowen. Because I think he'd been so, obviously it's such a weird experience for a guy to see their person they love be in so much pain. And he did say that afterwards it was quite traumatizing in a way, seeing me that in pain. And so I think he probably was just thinking, oh my gosh, she's fine, it's finally over for her, she can finally like relax. And I remember him just like kissing me and looking at me, and then looking at her, and just that moment is just incredible, that she was finally in my arms and I'd done it. And I felt so proud of myself, I felt so strong, I felt so powerful, like I'd experienced something that so many other women before me had. And that was actually another affirmation that I'd used throughout labour, was so many women before me have done this, so I can do it too. No matter what experience of labour you have, whether you have unmedicated labour, whether you have a vaginal birth, a C-section, an epidural, whether you have interventions, or whatever experience of labour a woman goes through, it is an experience that nobody else who hasn't been through labour can understand. And now I know that like it is just an unbelievable, otherworldly experience that is just, it's just crazy. And now I get that, now I can experience, and that's what I was so excited for throughout my pregnancy. I was always excited for the experience of labour, because I thought, I just want to know that feeling. I want to feel that. My whole life I've always wanted to be a mum, I've always wanted to experience pregnancy, and I found pregnancy potentially more challenging than labour in a way. Labour was the most mind-bendingly painful thing I've ever experienced, but in hindsight, I love that I got to experience it, and I don't know why. I just knew throughout pregnancy, I was like, I'm excited for childbirth, I'm excited for labour, because I want to know what that feels like. And it's weird, especially because I know some people are like, why would you want to do it unmedicated? Why would you not want to just have an epidural and not feel the pain? Again, the idea of an epidural scares me. the idea of an injection in my spine scares me, not being able to move, not being in control. I find any kind of medication kind of scary. I want to feel my body, I want to be with it completely, I want to be in control. And having that control throughout labour, like not control, but feeling the bodily sensations, feeling that urge to push, feeling those contractions, kind of going off into another world where you kind of switch off from it. I wanted to experience that, and while it was so so painful, and afterwards I remember thinking, I never can do this again. How am I going to have another baby, because I'm never going to do that again. Now I'm like, no, I wanted to feel that feeling, and I wanted to go through that, and I'll never forget it. And I look back at it with such like positivity and such joy, even though all the things I've just described to you are so painful and so difficult, and there were sort of parts of it that were a bit like dramatic, or I didn't really want to happen, like being downstairs and stuff. It's just, yeah, I genuinely can say now I absolutely loved it, and I'm so glad I've got it on video. Even if you're not a YouTuber, film your birth, because I watched it back a few days after, and in the days after giving birth I had this kind of funny feeling of like, it's like, I guess you're processing what's just happened, and it's very intense, and watching the labour back enabled me to process it so well, and I was able to actually have perspective on what it was actually like. Yeah, I would actually say that the part I just despised was the post-birth experience. Giving birth to the placenta, I had to have a catheter. I had no idea about any of this really. It's the sort of stuff you don't really think about, or you don't really look into much. You're so focused on pregnancy and labour that you don't really think about the post-birth stuff. I knew that I wanted to try and give birth to the placenta without the injection. That didn't happen because I hadn't gone for a wee, and I couldn't wee. So I had a catheter, and that often can stop you from giving birth to the placenta because of the fact that your bladder is so full. So I sat on the toilet for what felt like half an hour, nothing came out. I tried to push, but I was so exhausted, and I guess the motivation wasn't there anymore because the baby was out. And so I had a catheter, and I think there was like nearly half a litre of urine because I hadn't weed in so long, and I drank so much water through the labour. They were like, yes, you definitely needed to wee. And then that was incredibly painful. I absolutely despised that. And then had the injection, which was fine, and the placenta came out, which I don't really remember that, whether that felt painful or not really. That just felt like a really mild contraction maybe. And then the stitches. Had to have your legs up akimbo on the stirrups, and there was lots of people coming in, midwives coming in. I think there was a student midwife, which in hindsight again I probably should have said no to. I think they asked me when I was very out of it and I wasn't really able to say yes or no. The midwife who gave me the membrane sweep came in, and the doctor who I'd spoken to came in, which was lovely because they were coming in to congratulate me and be like, we're so happy that you went into labour and it all went well. And it was really lovely, but it did feel quite overwhelming having lots of people coming in, lots of like people doing stuff in my peripheral vision, and having the stitches and having the injection afterwards. Just wouldn't recommend. I'm being totally candid here, I don't want to freak any more pregnant women out, but like that, I did not love that. So probably, maybe it's helpful for you if you're watching this, probably put in your birth plan that you don't want loads of people in the room, because I didn't love that experience. And also they put Elowen on me to try and breastfeed her straight away, and then they were like, right, so we'll put her on your chest and maybe that'll be a good distraction whilst we're doing the stitches. Again, really don't know why they did this, because that was not a distraction. It was actually just really stressful because she wouldn't latch to begin with. The stitches did take quite a long time, I think, because they have to do them very delicately. It takes a while. So she was on me, she wasn't latching, and I was getting stressed about that. I was like, why is she not latching? There was also a lot of poo after she gave birth. Not my poo, her poo. Actually, I did not poo. I thought I did, and I asked my doula and she said, no, you didn't. So I'm grateful I didn't poo, because I genuinely thought I was 100% gonna poo. But there was a lot of meconium because she was overdue. Thankfully she didn't inhale anything, so that was one of the worries I had with being overdue, and that was all fine. They took her away, I think, to check that, maybe for a second. I'm trying to remember, and she was totally fine. But there was a lot of poo everywhere and she kept on pooing, so there was like clean up, and I was just like, it was just very like overstimulating. It was like people in the room, her on my chest trying to latch, someone down there doing stitches, people trying to talk to me about like the birth and it was just quite intense. And I really wish, yeah, she had been held by Alex skin to skin. I would have had just one person doing the stitches, and it would have been quiet and calm still, like an environment that felt calm and relaxed, because I was also shaking a lot post-birth, because you get that adrenaline, so you shake like crazy. And Alex also said that that part was really stressful for him because he didn't really know what was going on, and he thought there was something wrong with me. So he'd obviously just seen me give birth and it was all fine, and then there I was like involuntarily shaking. And then once that was over, I think we got moved to the birthing centre just to chill out a bit, to wash her, change her. I think she went under the light for a little bit because she was a bit, was it because she was a bit cold or she was a bit jaundiced? I don't know. She's a bit cold, I think. So they put, yeah, her temperature was a bit low, so they put her under a light for a little bit. I tried to breastfeed again, but it didn't work. So we hand expressed some milk and gave her like a syringe of milk. And then we were there for a little bit. I had a shower, we chilled out, and then they said that we could go down to the ward for some lactation support for the breastfeeding. And again, in hindsight, I would never have gone down there because I had no idea what we were going down to. I was given the impression that we were going down to be seen by somebody straight away to help with the breastfeeding. They were like, the team's great down there, they'll see you, they'll help with you. And that was not the case. It was a ward where you go and wait to be seen. The midwives were amazing. They were so lovely. They helped me so much post-birth. They were like, you know, one of them put a plait in my hair. They were cleaning her up, getting her dressed, talking to us lots about breastfeeding. They were so supportive. And also the midwife who gave birth to Elowen, she was incredible. Like I really want to point that out because I could not have done it without her. She was so incredible at coaching me through birth and giving me that support, giving me that motivation, and watching it back again. She was just so incredible, and midwives are just amazing people for doing what they do and bringing literal human lives into the world. And lots of the kind of, I guess, the hindsights of how I feel about my experience aren't to do with the midwives or the doctors or anything. It's more to do with, like, I guess, the experience of knowing what you want, and in hindsight being like, I wish that I was able to articulate that, because they're only going to do what they're trained to do and what they think is best. They don't necessarily know what you want or what you need, which is individual to you. They're going to go off of guidelines of what they would do. Also, I really recommend having a doula. Alana was incredible. Again, I feel like having her there whilst I was worried about Alex and his fear of hospitals was incredible, because she was there to support Alex when he needed it. And there are a few moments in the videos where she would be checking in on him and saying, you know, you sit down, I'll take over. And, you know, if he needed to go to the loo, I wasn't alone. She was constantly giving me that motivation and sort of whispering in my ear, you know, you remember this, we talked about this, you can do that. Or her just being there. The fact that she was holding my leg up for so long and was on her feet for like 12 hours, she was just absolutely incredible. And I could not have given birth without her holding my leg like that. And I don't know that anyone else would have done that. And maybe I would have needed forceps because baby was not coming out. But she held my leg up and she was coaching me and talking me through it all. In the lead up to birth as well, just the sessions that we had with her were so supportive and so helpful for planning birth. And even in the lead up to when I was overdue, she was such a calming presence when there was lots of noise on the internet, and even with speaking to family, lots of people having different opinions on, you know, them being like, maybe you should go to hospital, maybe, you know, you should do this in a very helpful way. But having other people's thoughts, to have her there to just be like, look, just go outside, take a walk with Alex, watch a funny movie. She was so supportive, so validating, and just like, you know, you still can have the birth that you wanted, but in hospital. And I believe in you for, you know, not wanting to have an induction. She was basically my advocate. And that's why I recommend a doula, because if you can afford it, I know it's a privilege to be able to afford, not everyone can, but if you can, and you have considered it, having someone there to advocate for you. There are a few moments where there were questions were asked where I wasn't able to answer them because I was too out of it. She knew what I wanted because she had my birth plan. She's been there for me throughout my pregnancy. She was able to say what I wanted, and also ask questions when the midwives presented different solutions to me, because they're recommending, you know, things like the electrode or the continual monitoring. She was able to ask them questions when I wasn't able to, and I'm really grateful for that, because I think that's potentially why those interventions didn't happen. Shout out to Alana, she's incredible, and I feel like I've gained a friend in her too, because she's just such a lovely person. And yeah, she stayed with us, and then when we were in the birthing centre and they said to go downstairs, in hindsight I really wish we'd just gone home, because it was optional. We had colostrum at home that I'd pumped, and also we have pumps that I could have put on my boobs and fed her from. So we went down to this ward, and this ward was the most negative experience out of my whole birthing experience. Up until then, I look back at all of the experience of my birth very positively, because we went down there, we had some lunch, and then I think a midwife came in and offered some help with breastfeeding, but it didn't really do anything. And it was just basically hours and hours and hours of different midwives coming in and nothing really helping. Feeling quite exposed because every single one of them wanted to obviously see my boob and touch my boob and help, which I know is part of it, but it's very weird going from, I guess I'm maybe the sort of person who doesn't love like showing off my body to people. It's very weird from doing that. It's very weird giving birth, being naked and having like lights shoved up your vagina and like people literally looking in and touching you, and then also having like many midwives come in and touch your boobs. Like, I'm fine with one midwife giving birth and touching and doing all the things she needed to do, and one person doing the stitches. Like, I can cope with that because I understand it's necessary. But going downstairs and just having so many people come in and see me kind of naked and touch my boobs, it just felt very, I don't know, I didn't like that. I wish I'd just been able to see one person, speak to them, or book an appointment with them or something, and be able to go home, because it made us very delirious. I'd obviously just given birth overnight, not slept, and then to go down to this ward and feeling like I had to stay awake because I was so worried about her because she wasn't latching on and wasn't feeding. She wasn't getting much milk. And I think that by that evening, because we went down there maybe midday, by maybe 5 or 6 p.m, I rang my parents and I said, could you please bring some colostrum from home? Because one of the head midwives had come in and said, what's your plan? Because she's not currently latching. And I said, well, I thought we were going to see the lactation team. I think they're called, yeah, the feeding support. And she said, yeah, the only thing is it's been a very busy day, so they're not able to see you right now. There's been a lot of births, which again, I know there's a struggle with the NHS at the minute. It's very, very busy and there's not enough staff. And I was like, yeah, but I haven't seen them yet, so I don't know what to do. And I felt very delirious and very out of it. And I felt like the midwife was kind of asking me for a solution. And I was like, I've never done this before. I don't know what to do. I don't want to give her formula yet. It's literally day one. I want to try to breastfeed her. So my parents bought the colostrum from home that I had pumped before, and we gave her that, and that helped her a little bit, but she was just very sleepy. Both Alex and I were so tired, we were falling asleep and not knowing what to do. We stayed there for the rest of the evening. More midwives came in to help, trying different positions, side lying, all of that. And then by late evening, like probably like 11, 12, we started to think we need to just get out of here, that we're getting fed up. So we spoke to a few different people and they said, okay, can you just stay for a little bit longer just to see if she latches and we'll give you a bit more help. And then I think by like 2 or 3 in the morning, we were like, we're done here. We're not waiting till the morning to see somebody. We've not got any sleep. We've only had naps on and off. We need to be in our bed. I'd rather be at home where I can pump. I can, go to the midwives the next day or something. I just wanted to be at home. There's such a urge to get home. And I think Alex wanted to go home early, but I was getting panicked by what the midwives were saying to me, basically. The fact they're kind of like, you need to stay here to see someone so that she can feed. But I just think it had the opposite effect, because I was staying there and she wasn't feeding because I was stressed, tired, and not able to think straight. Anyway, I'm being negative, but that's truly how I felt about it. So we eventually went home at 4 in the morning. They were not necessarily in support of that. I remember the midwife being a bit like, do you really want to go home? Is that a good idea? Like, we need to do some final checks on her. Like, she's not feeding. Like, what's your plan? And I think I was just, I really did feel like I had to push. I had to be a bit like, well, the thing is, I'm here, nothing's happening. I'd rather get home and blah, blah, blah. And then she made me watch this video about going home. And I just was like, essentially I had to just be like, I don't really care what you're saying to me. I'm going home. And we discharged ourselves. It felt a bit like I was being told off by like a school teacher. I was a bit like, you're not in charge of me. I don't know, it was a very weird dynamic that she was giving me. I was a bit like, I don't really know why you're trying to tell me what to do, because this is my baby and I'm my own person. That was the only midwife who'd done that, by the way. Every other midwife had been very lovely and kind and supportive. She was the first one that was a bit like, I don't really know why you're trying to tell me what to do. So we went home, we were exhausted, tired, we slept, and then the rest is history. I'm sure I vlogged the next week, and breastfeeding was a journey, but that was my experience in the hospital, and my experience of birth. I'm wondering if I've missed anything out. I feel like I'm going to watch this back and think I have, but it's probably 1,000 years long, so I don't need to add any more detail. But leave any questions down below if you think I missed anything, and I can also see if there's anything that's like common that I can answer in my next vlog. It was a wild experience. It was so powerful, so positive, so amazing. Interestingly, having actually just spoken about all of this, it is the post-birth stuff that I found the most negative, which potentially I knew would be the case because I planned for a home birth, because I kind of had looked up some of those experiences before the kind of all of that monitoring and not monitoring, all of that kind of post-birth stuff with lots of people involved where you're not really at home, I think is where a lot of it becomes a bit negative. If I'd been at home, they would have stitched me up and I would have been able to just get into bed and pump and figure that out with time. So grateful that I got to have the vaginal birth without any medication. I look at it very positively. I'm so happy that she came into the world so in such a healthy way, and there was nothing wrong with her because I was so worried about that being the case because of how overdue she was. She was perfectly healthy. There was no complications, and I'm so grateful for that, because childbirth is wild and there can be complications. So yeah, I'm here to say that you can be an advocate for yourself. I would really recommend writing a birth plan, even if it doesn't go to plan. It's so helpful to have one, because then the midwives can see that and try and tailor it as close to your birth plan as possible, and you have those kinds of, I guess, feelings of what you want out of your birth present still, even if the plan has changed. Advocate for yourself, and if you can't have a doula present, your birthing partners, educate them and give them the birth plan on what kind of birth you want and they want, so they can advocate for that. I know obviously medical stuff happens, emergency situations happen that you have no control over. Of course, that's what hospitals are for and doctors are for. But if that doesn't happen, you don't have to be felt under pressure to do anything that isn't necessary. There is that acronym BRAIN, which is very helpful. So I will put on screen what it is because I've forgotten what it is, but you can go through those basically questions with whoever it is who's asking what you want to do before making a decision. If it's not an emergency situation, they're going to have a conversation with you about it, and you can have the time to process and think about what you want to do. I'm going to wrap that up because that was so long. I'm really worried it's going to be like an hour-long birth story, even though I've already done a vlog. I hope you enjoyed the vlog. I hope you enjoyed this little rundown. I'm so excited for postpartum and for being a mummy. I'm already loving it. It's very challenging, but I'm overall loving it. Breastfeeding is still a bit of a challenge. I'm getting there. I'm hoping we'll make it to 6 weeks and then things will settle a bit and she'll get the hang of it and I'll get the hang of it. But yeah, I'm just in that happy bubble really, and trying to focus on the positives through all the challenging side of the newborn trenches. And she is incredible. She's the most beautiful, perfect little girl I could have ever dreamed of. So yeah, hit subscribe if you're new. Give this video a like, because I'm going to be sharing my mummy life, and I'm excited for my content for the first time in a really long time. I actually feel so excited about sharing this new phase of my life. I'll see you in the next vlog, which will be, yeah, the first week of mum life and parent life. So I will see you for that. Bye.